Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the $5 million project. So in this episode, what I'm going to talk to you about is scoping. Now, pretty much in any project you're going to do, having a scope or understanding what you're trying to achieve is very, very important. When you're doing a product that requires significant amounts of development, I think it's probably more important than ever. So from my side, what I needed to do is I needed to be able to take everything that I had in here, all the notes and documentation I had, and put it into a scope so that the development team could understand it. And at the first stage, really my goal was to make sure actually the board could understand it, because we had a board meeting coming up sort of towards the end of January. So we're really talking, I had the Christmas break and the first couple of weeks of January to try and get as much of this documented as I possibly could. Working with one, sometimes two BAs, the two of us were trying to articulate this into a visual format. And I realized fairly early on that getting into a visual format for me was critical, because only once I could start seeing it in real life was I able to say, that doesn't quite work, or that needs to go there, or that link needs to go there. For other people it might be different, but I started off doing something visual but very, very rough, and you can see on the screen here just a simple hand-drawn note or diagram. So I've taken a notebook, I've drawn out what I think I need. At the same time, I would then type up notes explaining the diagram. So if someone clicks the button here, this is what it does. The purpose of this particular module or element is to do X, Y, Z. So I'd produce those two documents. I'd then have a meeting with the BA, and I'd go through maybe 4 or 5 of these pairs of documents. And once they understood what I was after, they would then go away and write more detail around exactly what that scope was looking like, and they would start to actually design it in a format that was visual and a lot more detail than my sketches. And they wouldn't necessarily do this for every single person that's putting together a product, but I'm incredibly visual, and it took a bit of trial and error before between us realized that I needed that in order to sort of be able to sign something off. So we actually used a tool called Adobe XD, and that enables you to pull together all the user interfaces in a way that the product looks like it's real. Clearly it's not. You can connect it and you can make a button click to go somewhere. We didn't bother with that, but at least you can see the different pages and you can see all the level of detail that you need. So there's an example of that on the screen now. There was a couple of things that I learned personally that enabled me to speed this process up, because there's a lot of these that we're doing. One particular module, we ended up with 113 pages, so 113 pairs of each of these elements that I showed at the beginning for one module. So you can imagine when you're doing that volume of scopes, any sort of time saving you can find is advantageous. So the first thing I did, rather than constantly sketching into a notepad, taking a photo of that and pushing it into a folder that could then be shared, I bought an iPad Pro. iPad Pro is fantastic because it enables you to actually sketch, and you can sketch live. And with a pen, obviously, if you make a mistake, you have to cross it out or start again or use a pencil. With this, you can draw what you're after, and then if that's not right, you can scrub little bits out, you can add new bits in, you can connect diagrams together. It's just live and a lot easier, and it saves straight into the folder system, so there's no taking photos and transporting it through. So that, for me, has been fantastic, and I continue to use that today. The other thing I did is, you can imagine I'm writing a lot of notes around this, so I actually purchased some dictation software, and Dragon is the one I use, but that enabled me to have a microphone on, and as I was drawing I could dictate my thoughts around each of these elements so that the two were sort of done concurrently. At this stage I've now got all these notes through to the developer, or sorry, to the BA, and they're producing the XD files so that we can connect something up and have something ready to go to the board meeting itself. And on the screen now you can see just one example of sort of what my evenings look like. So I'd be there, I'd have my iPad, and there's one of the XD files that's been sent to me, and I'm actually drawing and annotating on there where I'd like changes and then sending that back through to the BAs. So that was sort of my regular evenings throughout the Christmas period in preparation for this board meeting. Okay, so we've reached the board meeting. I don't want to spend a huge amount of time going through these meetings because we've already covered that in previous episodes, but I want to talk about some of the specifics that we did discuss here because they're quite important to the stage of the project. So firstly, as you can see on the screen here, I sent through an agenda. In advance with the agenda, I also sent through links to all the storyboards that we'd produced, the XD files that outlined the product as we'd visualized it to date, and some of the updated scoping documents that you would have seen the original ones a couple of episodes ago. We built those out further and got them into a far greater degree of detail. And actually looking back, the scoping documents we had in January are pretty much spot on for what we're looking for the product to be, just not as detailed as they are today. One of the other things we'd worked on was actually a business process overview. And you can see a diagram on the screen now. And that outlined how the product would interact with the key stakeholders and the various different modules and how they sat in it. And when we first started doing this, I didn't necessarily see the benefit, but having it together, even now, enable me to actually see, okay, so that's where we sit, that's what that piece of the puzzle is going to do, and that's who it's going to talk to. So there were three other things that I came onto the meeting with that I really wanted to go through. And one of them was a complexity document. So my sort of niggling concern, if you will, is that I'd scope this product to be everything that I wanted it to be. But in this meeting, I really wanted to talk about, hey, do we do this piece? Shall we include this, or am I taking things a little bit far? So I'd asked the BA and dev team to go through the scope that we had and actually give it a complexity ranking to each of the individual modules. And again, you can see this on the screen here. And the complexity ranking was simple. If it was easy, it had a certain score. If it was really, really complex, it had a different score. And then there was a range all the way between. And the challenge looking back is that the scoping hadn't been done in enough detail to have a really accurate level, but at least it enabled us to have a more mature conversation around, do we include this? The team think it's a really complex piece of work. Shall we bother with this at the moment, or shall we leave it on the sidelines and come back to it? And the decision on the day was, look, we should pretty much continue with everything that we've got in here. Nothing is too complex, but we'll stagger it. We'll make this section our core focus, and there might be one or two things that we bolt on at a later date. So the other two things that I focused on was go-to-market strategy, and also our actual reasons for existing, like why we're in business, how we help our clients. And I've already produced sort of some detail on this in previous meetings, but you can see the example of why we exist on the screen here. It's really, the problems that we are helping our clients solve. And I wanted this to be ingrained in everyone's mind at this stage, because when we're talking to people, when we're talking to clients about what we do, or if the other shareholders having conversations with people they know, I want them to be able to clearly articulate, our product does this, our product solves this problem. That way it removes a lot of ambiguity, which can definitely happen when you're doing a new software product that isn't similar to anything else. You can't say, oh, it's like this or it's like this. So you need these reference points to be able to explain to people at a high level exactly what it is. And then the go-to-market strategy. This takes some of the work we've done previously on financial projections and starts talking, okay, if we're going to launch this product, how are we going to do it? What are the timings going to be around this? Are we going to put this module live here? Are we going to build everything and then put this module live? Are we going to partner with people? Are we going to hire a direct sales team? Are we going to do paid advertising? All that sort of thing was covered in here. Wasn't too detailed at this stage. And the reason behind that is I knew that we were quite a long way off actually having a product to go live. But at least it gave us the discussion points, like areas we could talk around to see if we were all on the same page in terms of how we were going to go to market. And actually, since putting together this go-to-market document, a lot has changed. Obviously, the world economy has been rather shaken up by COVID. The development project has taken quite a bit longer than we expected, even though we clearly expected things to take a bit longer. So whilst that document still remains valid, we've had to be agile and reactive, and we've had to change a lot in there. So instead of launching at a conference that was due, that conference was cancelled. We had to pull that idea, we had to replace it with something else. And I can talk about our updated go-to-market a bit closer to the time, but at least we had the bare bones that enabled us to go into that session and have some conversations around what everyone thought was the right way forward and what we shouldn't be doing. In the next episode, what I'm going to talk about is some sort of business fundamentals, if you will. Getting the company registered, getting a tax number, setting up accounting software, registering for bank accounts, shareholder agreements, all very, very important stuff, not particularly sexy or exciting. And you'll note that we're 6 months into the journey now, and we're only just starting to well, we've been thinking about it, but we're only just starting to do this stuff. At the same time, what I'm going to talk about is the detailed level of scope. So in this episode, I've spoken about sort of how we've scoped the product to date. There was a realization at some point in here that some of the information we needed, I actually didn't know. And that's not really surprising. I hadn't worked with some of this tech before, or it just didn't exist. So we had to find a way to fill these knowledge gaps that we didn't have to ensure that our scope was in as much detail as it possibly could be. So we're going to talk about that, and then we're pretty much caught up to today, which is at a point where we're developing like mad and trying to get a date where we can actually go live and ensure our go to live strategy is relevant and good to go.